we go. Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Ethan Fassett. I'm here to talk to you about platforms. A quick overview of GREE. If you don't know what a GREE is, GREE is one of the largest social mobile gaming companies in the world. It was founded about 5 years ago by Yoshikazu Tanaka in Tokyo, Japan. It actually started as a social network, purely on mobile devices. It's always been a mobile company. And then began shipping social games a few years after it launched and saw dramatic growth within Japan and is now a predominant social mobile gaming company in Japan. About a year ago, GREE formed GREE International in the United States, led by Naoki Aoyagi. They opened up a game studio, began producing titles, which we've recently launched, and then about a year ago also acquired a company called OpenFaint and made its presence known in the platform space in the US as well as other markets throughout the world. Other notable acquisitions would be Funzio a few months back to accelerate game development. GREE continues to be focused on social mobile gaming solely. Global footprint, and the platform itself is a global footprint as well. So what I want to do is talk today about platforms in particular and why platforms are valuable. What do they do? The term platform is a very generalized, overused term that has very, very little specific meaning these days, and so it's important to define it specifically when you want to talk about it. A platform can apply to a number of different things. It could apply to a technology platform. In this case, platforms in the social mobile gaming community are focused around distribution. GREE is focused on distribution, but also provides technology. But the platform itself is really about moving users in and out of games for game developers. So why is that important? So this may sound a little obvious, but let's just cover the bases so we all have common definitions and terms that we'll talk about for the rest of the discussion. As gaming moved from sort of a traditional arcade-style premium model where you would build something, it was primarily 100% client-side tech and content, and you'd ship it, and you'd charge somebody up front for it, and you wouldn't charge them again after they began playing it. The economics and the equation for efficiently running your business were fairly straightforward. But as a lot of live game practices from the MMO world, and then of course from social gaming as we know it on Facebook, became really the predominant model and proved itself out also in the mobile space, the economics and the dynamics of running a game and doing so effectively became somewhat more complicated and really focused on the post-launch period of operating your game. And so live operations is really the crux of social mobile gaming. And in live operations, you're really focused on three primary things at all times: the acquisition of users, and doing so as inexpensively as possible, while still trying to find the most qualified users to acquire from, and then retaining and re-engaging those users, again in the most cost-effective manner in which you can, and then monetizing those users successively, identifying who your monetizable users are, developing features around those, and continuing to provide meaningful content and gameplay experiences for those users in particular to maximize your revenue over the longest period of time. So a social platform enables this and accelerates all three of these traits. We'll go into more specifics, but in terms of acquisition, when a platform is healthy, it provides low-cost acquisition of highly qualified users. It uses social graph data to try and pre-qualify those users for you. On retention and engagement, it provides cost-effective, free, effectively, engagement channels by which you can reactivate players who may have left and stopped playing your game, and then also provides tools and services for monetization, which can range from things like a universal currency to other things like storefront management tools and technology, which would offset development costs. The idea being to reduce friction for purchasing. A little bit more specifically then, so lifetime value is what we're all optimizing for in live operation games. LTV is a function of the amount of revenue you can get out of your users, how cheaply you can acquire those users, and how long you can keep those users playing your game. The argument to a platform is that with your game embedded in a platform, all three of these things are amplified. On the acquisition side, you use things like game requests in order to reach out to users in an inexpensive way. Otherwise, you have to use advertising. To re-engage those players, you use things like notifications so that one player who's playing a game can reach out to the remaining players on that game that may have gone dark on you. In the platform, you have a wider audience than what you can maintain within your existing game. Game developers are very good, or some game developers are very good at establishing an in-game graph. This is something you should be doing, assuming that your games use social components as part of gameplay. But your in-game graph is inherently limited to the scope of players within just your game. The premise of a platform is that the social graph that's enabled through the broader network of players that are brought in through the aggregate of all games on that platform provide bridges into other subsequent social games. They provide a metagraph, which allows for broader acquisition. All of these things enhance LTV. So what's going on in mobile today? There really is not a predominant platform right now. So mobile is, while very exciting in proving out monetization and acquisition on certain scales, very costly, and it has a lot of overhead to it, both in terms of direct costs as well as operational costs. In terms of acquiring users, very, very high CPA right now. That will only continue to go up. If you were here for the prior discussion, you know that there's a lot of attention and focus that you have to give around App Store rankings. You have to manage multiple advertising accounts, and you have to synchronize these accounts so that you can do burst campaigns to make sure that you push yourself up on the rankings. And if you get high enough, you'll begin to get organic influx. You can try using cross-promotional tools to try and augment and enhance your existing ad campaigns. Nonetheless, this is a lot of overhead. This is people to manage all those different accounts. It's variability in CPI costs. So it is very expensive in a lot of different ways. Viral engagement. There is no predominant social graph or metagraph. It's only in-game graphs, which you have to maintain. In terms of re-engaging your players, you have to use traditional channels, push notifications, email, whatever it is that you can employ within your game. But if that user falls out of your game and you don't have other games to cross-promote from, you have to go and reacquire that user, and you have to go back through this side of the chart. Again, you just had to pay for that same user twice. So, let's see. There's also some other aspects, I think, in mobile right now that are a little bit frustrating. So always being able to track a completion of a viral invite is really difficult. When a user goes through the App Store to install an application, it's hard to follow some sort of referring code. Sometimes it's just a little fuzzy to actually understand how well you are converting. If this user and this experience is contained within a platform, then you're able to track things much more effectively, and you can optimize occasionally. You can optimize more effectively. So this is the current state of mobile today, but a ton of people are getting into the game right now, including GREE. And so what I want to do is try and sort out how platforms are coming together in my week 2x2 here. Actually, this one has changed from my last Casual Connect talk, where we were looking a little bit more at the OS level. But what I want to do here is focus, since more of these platforms have begun to focus themselves, even over the last 6 months, around social and gaming in particular. I want to talk about that. So, very simple axes here. Further to the left, more game-focused. Higher up, more social-focused. So, GREE, as I stated, social mobile is our core focus. So we put ourselves in the upper right of the graph. Game Center would also sit up there, as would Zynga, based on recent intentions they've published. Facebook and iOS 6 was a really interesting announcement. I think that in general, for the overall platform business, almost anybody on this graph, save Android, I think this was a good thing. GREE thinks this is a good thing. For Facebook and for Apple to do deeper integration helps everybody. However, Facebook doesn't sit to the far right because they're a heterogeneous social network. They're focused on a broader app ecosystem. They're focused on developing social connections between people that are using a different model. It's a user model that's based on sort of a general social relationships. It's your terrestrial graph that you import. In fact, they don't really encourage the kinds of connections that game players may want, where you don't really have a meaningful emotional relationship with someone and you simply want to connect with them for a quid pro quo, where they can click on something to get you a gift and you will likewise do so in the future. Or you want to be able to do some kind of a competitive matchmaking algorithm that will identify a player solely based on some kind of behavioral characteristic and has nothing to do with whether or not that person has a social relationship with you or somebody two hops out on your graph. So because of that, their business is slightly different, but still beneficial. GREE sees itself as providing some of those additional types of social relationships. And so therefore we see the game graph, as we call it, not game singular, but game more general, sitting on top of that and providing augmented experience for that. And that's something that our company will be focused on in the future. Google Play, so I put these guys a little bit further down on the graph just because Google's social strategy has not really proven itself out. Google Plus, it's still there, but we don't know really where it's going yet. And Google also is a generalized company. They have multiple markets to hit. A couple of other points of note. Amazon, for those of you that do follow the Android platform, Amazon I think has been very, very good for Android. I was actually talking to a blogger about this. They were asking about Android and its poor monetization characteristics. So everybody knows this. This is like conventional wisdom now that Google didn't do a good job of collecting credit cards up front, and so it's really, really hard to convert users into payers, which is true. However, what's interesting about the Android platform that is distinct from Apple is that Android necessarily left a very open ecosystem. So it's a little messy at first when it first gets going, but it allows for other marketplaces like Amazon to come in and be able to create very, very healthy marketplaces. And there's opportunity for others of these to arise as well. So while in the initial trajectory it might actually be slower to monetize and gain market efficiencies, over time, entrants such as these and others could create a competitive field and actually become very, very lucrative. So it's interesting. I'm not sure where that would go. But nonetheless, in the terms of a social mobile platform, not really social, not really game-focused per se. Flurry, also an interesting platform in the sense that it provides analytics tools, but uses those on top of its ad platform to distribute users. So it's not a social platform, but it certainly can do games, and it's one of its strongest verticals, and so it recently announced this kind of publishing marketplace relationship with Activision. So it's interesting to see where that might go. But again, it's sort of a different approach. And really what we're doing right now is looking at social gaming as really what we think is the core for serving a gaming audience and being able to provide those sorts of platform network effects that I just talked about. So let me try and, here, this is how we will serve developer segments. So what we want to do is look at the world of developers right now. How do you accelerate a platform? How do you get momentum in a platform? Well, you provide value to the content builders that want to work on your platform. And so, we have to look at the segmentation of developers that we have out there. And this is the classic. You have your top tier developers. These are the big guys. You have mid-tail. These are people who maybe have started as a smaller studio, but really have found success under titles and have been able to kind of maintain momentum by leveraging successive titles. Mega Jump, Mega Run, pretty awesome. And then you have long tail, which is a very, very long asymptotic string of developers that are churning out new games, that are migrating into a new game paradigm. And really that is what's going on. I'm glad that I get to drop the word paradigm in a talk, but really there is a big shift in the way in which game design is working, game operations are developing. I think that shift is well underway, but even a year ago when I would give these discussions, I think there was a different perspective amongst the audience. So what GREE sees is that it's trying to enable all three of these different segments into this trajectory of the market, which is the more lucrative, freemium, live operations, social mobile kind of a game construct. And we're trying to provide tools and services for these different segments accordingly. Just a quick note, I'm sorry, these are not mutually exclusive, so in fact they're kind of subsuming each other this way. So everybody wants cheap and efficient user acquisition. But in reality, when you look at top tier developers, these guys are highly capitalized, so they've got a lot of the internal tech, they've built a bunch of titles, they've probably migrated off of Facebook and they're looking at new markets right now, and they're gonna bring a lot of that tech and experience. So really, the best thing that we can do for them is be able to provide those kinds of acquisition and retention components that we were talking about. Mid and long tail, let's start with, stick with mid. So these guys, again, maybe one title, pretty successful, plus another title that they're really trying to ramp up. Their engagement is really, really valuable. So things like notifications, stuff like that, these are re-engagement techniques that are really valuable. I think when people talk about cost of acquiring users, retention is kind of, it's understated. Actually, I think retention is maybe even more important, just because you don't want to have to acquire a user twice. So I actually think it is more valuable than most people presume. The long tail is just has more needs. So obviously traffic, obviously retention, but tech too. It's expensive to build things like over-the-air virtual goods management system, where you can update the inventory that you're selling to users or dynamically change pricing. Being able to run A/B testing effectively, also very difficult. So there's a number of basic analytics. There's all kinds of things here where a platform can add value and where GREE intends to add value. But then there's also other things to actually educate developers. So just to map features that we have against these sorts of things, right? GREE is a global platform. We think this distinguishes us from some of our competitors. We want to make sure that developers in the US have access to players in Japan. It's a very lucrative market. We want to make sure that global markets are really accessible, because if you look at where things are going right now and really how much demand there is out there, you need a solution that can distribute and localize games effectively across the world right now. Cross-promotion, very, very valuable. Cross-promotion also is valuable at the mid-tail as well. Generally, those developers have multiple titles in market, and they want to be able to at least cross-promote amongst those titles, and then to be able to set up specific sharing rings as well. Long-tail support, so support and consultation. GREE actually does do consultation with developers to help them understand key methods for optimization. We look at game KPIs. We try and understand where things are weak, where things are strong. And then we also provide some things for more casual gaming, leaderboards, achievements, those sorts of things. Those are anti-features. You have to have those. Really, this is how GREE looks at the platform space right now and how we're starting to sort out where products and services lie. So again, just to wrap things up, why a platform? Because the platform amplifies all of the key characteristics that you're trying to optimize around developing a live operations game. We focus things along these three tiers. And the way we look at our platform, the way we look at our market, again, global distribution and global reach. Being able to provide the widest possible audience for all developers of all segments. So I actually cut out a number of slides to try and just get to this core message. I wanted to leave time for questions. And if we have any, I'm more than happy to take them now. There's been some pretty interesting announcements in the news, especially yesterday, around platforms and game developers and how they all interact. So maybe there's some fun questions to talk about there. But otherwise, I think I'll open up to the floor. Thank you very much.
We do have a couple of minutes if anybody does have a question they'd like to ask right now. If not, and you want to have a private conversation with, feel free to grab him in the back, and he'll be able to take some questions from you there. Thank you.
Thank you.